So this is a product called OpenEyes, which is from Moorfields Eye Hospital, but we're now an open source foundation in our own right, so a bit like Apache, but unlike Apache, a British version, which is slightly unusual. What I want to do now is just to run through what it is and some of the areas that we've got into, and give you a quick demo of the product. So without further ado, we'll go to the heart of the reason for OpenEyes' existence with it, which is this thing, which is a paper record for a patient. And these things are in vast quantities, not only in Moorfields, but in many, many hospitals, and many places still run on putting things on paper. And it's a directive of Moorfields that we are going to be almost paperless by the end of 2013. And the way we're going to do this is by pushing all the information relating to a patient onto electronic record. And that is what OpenEyes is. And it really comes down to this particular problem. Now this, as you probably are aware, is an air traffic control screen. And the analogy to a patient record is very similar. Because if you imagine trying to make decisions as an air traffic controller and trying to work out where the planes are, if you had that information spread over several different systems, it would be impossible. You would have problems, you would have disasters, you would have issues cropping up. But that is exactly the problem that we've got with certainly ophthalmology, but also across a lot of the patient records that you have, even in the electronic ones that you see out there. Information is absolutely all over the place. We have it in pharmacy systems, imaging systems like lasers, injections, things like AMD, DRS, if you know about those sort of things, ultrasound, imaging equipment, and ophthalmology is a case in point where there are many different pieces of imaging equipment that are there that have the information, great information, but they're not at the fingertips of the clinician who needs to make a diagnosis. And it's a real issue. And if you look around the place, you won't find EPR systems with all the information in one place, looking at that data and making sense of it in one go. And as you see, we've got things like from pathology with blood tests, we've got clinical examinations, all that information being there, but in lots of different places. So the poor old clinician has a really hard job trying to work out what's where. A lot of it's in the paper record, but a lot of it isn't. And that's where the problems begin. And that obviously gives a risk to the patient, and it gives a risk to the long-term care of the health of the individual. Information held in other systems as well, the standard hospital systems. And again, we need to try and extract that and pull it into one place. And that is the whole point of OpenEyes, is that we bring it together, all the information, be it images, be it pathology, be it examinations, be it correspondence, so that the clinician in one view has the ability to see everything in a holistic way and make decisions on it. And there will be some more information that I'll come to in just a second. Some of the key things about this, though, is that it is an open source system. That means it's not just open source in the sense that lots of people can go and develop the software and we're all very happy, but it's designed by clinicians for clinicians, and a lot of clinicians are getting behind this and offering their resources and their experience in the design of OpenEyes. So we must have some like 50 plus clinicians around the country, and indeed from America and Europe as well, who are actively participating in designing the requirements for OpenEyes and the data set that underpins it. So in that sense, we have already a huge number of people collaborating, and this is only going to get better as we start to talk about OpenEyes more. Up until now, we haven't really done so. It's been word of mouth. But in the future, next year, when we launch this properly, you'll see a lot more activity and a lot more people getting involved. It's a single clinical portal, I just mentioned, everything coming into one place so that the clinician can see what's going on. And we need to have rapid data entry. I'm not a clinician, I work in IT, I'm a product manager, but I do know clinicians, and they're a bunch who hate writing things down, and they will do it as quickly as possible. They hate entering data. So what we need to do is to try and develop some metaphors, some interfaces that allow us to do that very quickly. If possible, automatically. If you have a machine that can do it, let it put that data in as quickly as possible. And that's what we're trying to do. Automatic data capture should be intuitive, predictive. So wherever possible, we're slimming it down, speeding it up. And we've also working on standard data sets. So these are sets of data for each clinical specialty that are standard across the board, so that everybody who's using this feeds data into that one standard data set. And those data sets are now being approved and agreed across the country, and indeed we're looking at making sure they're international in their remit as well. So let's have a look at the single clinical portal. This is an early prototype that we had a couple of years ago. If you want to see what it looks like now, just pop to the booth just around the corner. We can give you a running commentary. But the idea here is that very quickly you can, go back to it. Everything is there in one place. That on the left-hand side, you've got all the things that have happened to that patient in that episode of care, and a diagram. And those diagrams is where we really do see a change in how things are stored and data captured. So we're talking about fast and intelligent data entry. You want to get the thing captured. In ophthalmology, as well as a lot of other disciplines in the medical profession, diagrams about what's going on, what the diagnosis is, are key. Wouldn't it be better if you could capture them electronically so that it's quicker to do those diagrams, but as you do them, it captures data? So this is an example of one going in practice. So this is a drawing tool which we call iDraw. It's used extensively throughout the system. So wherever in terms of the ophthalmic set, there are things that can be described. Here we're looking at a tear in the retina. Now, all the retinal tears always point to the middle, I'm told by my colleagues in the clinical world. So this follows that. We have stitches and tears and cuts, all of which can be added to the diagram, and I'll show you a bit more of that in a minute. But the key thing about that is as you define that diagram, it actually is defining the data. Press the report and you get the text coming out at the bottom here. Fantastic, because that can go straight into a piece of correspondence to a GP, etc. Even better, that is going straight into the data record and is there for that patient across the board. So it's a standard data set. You can then start doing, and it becomes fairly obvious once the data's there and it's there across the board for many patients in the same way, captured in the same standard, you can then do outcome analysis on it. How did your patients do 3 months after the operation, 6 months after the operation? How did that particular drug regime do for that particular patient? So this becomes an absolutely key part of where OpenEyes it delivers. On the website, being open source, we put everything up there for people to see what we're doing, but also to interact with. So if any of you are clinicians, go to the website, openeyes.org.uk, and go to the development tab. All of these things here are those particular diagrams that we've just seen for different specialties and different pieces of the ophthalmic jigsaw. The solution also has a whole load of training and e-learning backed up with it, because we recognise that as a solution it's got to be there to be easy to understand and easy to get into place and cheap. Obviously, being open source, the software is free, but the e-learning stuff you pay a bit for. But again, we want to bring the costs right down. So a whole e-learning slew of solutions, not only telling you how to use the product, but how to use it within processes and how to use it clinically as well. And as we move on, we're talking about all that data going into the system. So here we have all the data coming into that one single clinical portal. I've just mentioned it about the data set. Well, here's a part of that clinical data set. I think this is the one for glaucoma. And you'll see there are many different items here. You don't have to sort of get into the detail here, but we have cataract already agreed nationally. We have glaucoma being agreed, and we have AMD starting to be set up now. So these are being set up by the Royal College of Ophthalmologists, not only in the UK, as I said, but also in the States. And this is the data set that is now being added to each time we do a patient record. And that is a huge amount of data that is there and is really valuable for people like pharmaceutical companies, for people doing research and development, etc. And for the first time, we have a huge amount of data about patients right from the start of their clinical pathway, when they see an optometrist, right the way through to the end, when they go back via the GP, via the trust and surgery maybe, back to the optometrist for checkups and things later on. But all going into that data set and all adding to the ability to understand what's happened and what's going on. And obviously what that means is that you can then do this stuff of outcome analysis. So here's some examples. We can start doing the obvious stuff like numbers of examinations and procedures. Well, that's okay. But then you can start doing the correlation of a particular something, intervention, be it drug or surgery, with other conditions in the eye, be it the visual acuity, be it the fields, or the condition of the eye. How are they doing? How's the patient doing? So these sort of things can then be really important in terms of then treating future patients. It's all part of the regime, and obviously pharmaceutical companies are very interested in this, obviously, because they can then test their drugs and see how they're doing. Test how a specific procedure does, not just at the time of doing it, but also in time. And a lot of companies, a lot of organisations, we're talking to Orbis, who are the flying eye company out of the States, or a non-government organisation. They go in and they do a whole load of operations out of the back of their McDonnell Douglas aircraft, do the operations, do a whole load of cataracts and then leave, which is fine. But what they need to know is how many of those cataracts 6 months later are still okay. And so with this software, they're going to start looking at being able to do that and understand the success of doing a whole load of procedures in time. Is there anything they could tweak? Are drug interventions required that would help the effectiveness thereafter? It also gives us costings and allows us to understand the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness of a particular procedure, as well as the time taken, etc. And of course, for busy hospitals, trying to put that throughput through a busy clinic is really, really important. I work at Moorfields, where OpenEyes comes from. The clinics are absolutely heaving. And as we have an aging population with all the chronic diseases that we do have, like glaucoma and AMD, etc., these are only going to get worse. So we have to develop new and effective mechanisms for understanding better ways of treating people. And we can do things like virtual clinics, get people through, get them seen, and then let a consultant at a later time run through all the results in his own time, in his own space, using the information in that single clinical view to show what should be done and treat people in a much quicker and more effective mechanism. And here's a particular example of what we will do. This is a mock-up, but it shows visual acuity over time mapped against a particular drug intervention. And of course, once you've got the data being stored in one place in one way, we can do this far more effectively. But having the data there also allows us to do clever things with decision support. So OpenEyes is not just about the record, that's fantastic, and it doesn't exist anywhere else. What it allows us to do is to manage that data and use that data in helping us make decisions in decision support. So this is an example based on a cataract, actually, and it's based on a study of 55,000 cataract operations and the outcomes of them. And what they did is take all the information down about the cataract, who did it, the outcome, what they were to start with, and then what happened. And what they were trying to do is to work out the skill of the operation required to do a particular sort of cataract, and looking at the percentage rate of a particular issue, a condition, post-capsular rupture, on this particular set of cataracts. And this is what this particular tool is here. So what we're doing here is defining that cataract and then reporting on it. And you see here, for a particular post-capsular rupture, risk rate for that for that surgeon was 20. If we move it to a different grade of surgeon, in this case a consultant, the risk rate goes down. So obviously, and let me show that again to you. Okay, so it starts off for a junior between 1 and 3 years experience, we have a risk rate of 21%. We change it to a consultant based on that data that we captured, which I was talking about earlier. That risk rate comes down, and that's the sort of decision support that we're looking at building into OpenEyes. This is already built in, but as we get all that data together from all the various pieces of the jigsaw that I've been showing you, as we bring it in from glaucoma, from cataract, we bring it in and we understand the outcomes and the interventions and how good they are, we can start building this decision support in, so that obviously there is much better, there's less risk, and there is more benefit to patients at the end of the day. I think we'll move on. So the how of OpenEyes, so that's what it is, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. But it's effectively based on the iPhone principle. So OpenEyes effectively is this. So Moorfields has decided to put a team together to build the iPhone, to build the operating system. And what we're doing, because of the open source mechanisms, we're hoping for a lot of people to get involved to not only develop the software, but also to get involved in defining the requirements, as I said, right up front. And as I said, so far we've got 3 trusts actually helping us develop. We've got other people giving Moorfields or giving the OpenEyes Foundation money now to develop OpenEyes. We have a large body of interest now building in the UK, and as I say, also around the world, in Europe, in Australia, and in the States, about people getting involved, because the software obviously is open source, it'll be license free. There may be cost involved in installing it and supporting it, but it will be a much lower cost than it would be otherwise. It is there for the public good, and that's the way that we're trying to push this. This has been designed, as I say, by consultants for consultants. Now, managing this obviously is a little bit more tricky. No big company, no commercial company doing it, but instead we have a foundation, the OpenEyes Foundation. It's a not-for-profit charity that has been set up by Moorfields, totally independent though now, to run OpenEyes and make it successful. So it's going to own and develop the OpenEyes vision. It's going to develop the product, so it's going to get developers in and help people get involved and make the product. Owns the intellectual property, very important to make sure that it can move forward, and also manage risk as well, because obviously this is a product, it's going to be used clinically, it's got to be right 24/7, and it's really got to work properly for everybody, so no clinical risk. So what we have to try and do is to make sure that the product is bulletproof. So the foundation will be there to QA, to quality assure the product, to test it wherever it's been developed, and then put an OpenEyes stamp on it, so that anyone who sees the OpenEyes stamp will therefore know that it's been quality assured and it is of a certain standard and robust for use in the health service. And as I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, it's there to, once the data starts flowing into the system, and we've got a lot of body of knowledge. I should point out that in Moorfields already we have, I think since it went live back in January, we now have a body of data relating to operations. I think it's about 6,000 operations now that is there that we've got to be able to start using and analysing for research purposes, which the guys at Moorfields, who are big into R&D, are very, very happy with. So there are loads of benefits in terms of using the open source and using something like OpenEyes. And I think if you're here and you know about open source, you'll get a lot of these anyway. License free. Sorry, it's improved patient care because of those things that I've been talking about, because you're starting to use the data, it's all in one place and you can see the data in terms of outcomes. So standard data sets, standard analysis, all those things that are good. In fact, it's a bit like the national programme was designed to be, but never quite got there. This is effectively what we're trying to get to with this, and actually succeeding because we're getting people coming in on board. Paper disappears in our route, and it's got to disappear from Moorfields by the end of next year, and that equates to a lot of savings. And I think certainly from Moorfields' point of view, putting about £4 million worth into the development of this is easily paid back over the lifetime of the development, which is about 3 years. There's a whole load of financial management on the back of this, because if you've got the understanding of who's done what and when, what was involved, and you've got it nailed to the nth degree, barcode scanning of things like any of the other things that used in operations. PLIX, patient level information costing system, comes into its own. It's a bit like the American hotel billing system, but done for the NHS, i.e. understanding how much it costs to do things and what's the best and most efficient ways of doing it for the patient care, not just for the good of a commercial organisation. Allows better operational management because you can start managing processes. This is based on care pathways, change the efficiencies, and you see what happens. And what we're trying to do is obviously integrate as much good technology as possible in all this stuff. Very easy to train as well, and with that e-learning package on the back of it, obviously much more financially viable. License free, as I've mentioned, and industry driven, with the total ethos of being public, for the public good, and driving eye care, good eye care outcomes, not only in the UK but worldwide as well, which is what we're seeing at the moment. So I think that's probably enough of that. What I'll do is in 2 seconds give you a quick show of the product, if I can find my mouse. There we are. So this is a view of the patient record, if you like, the front end, the patient summary, and over time the patient summary will have loads more information. comorbidities, other interventions from other disciplines, etc. At the moment, it's got demographics, it's got other episodes of care, and histories in terms of ophthalmic diagnosis and then systemic diagnosis from the past, as well as allergies and other things that may be important. But the idea is that we will, it's an event-driven model, and we'll pick a new event which is going to be an examination. In this case, it's a cataract examination. And using those drawing tools that I showed you or was showing you a bit earlier, we can quickly run through and we can open up some of these drawing tools. In this case, it's a cataract anterior segment. And what we can do is, in an examination, quickly define what is going on and what sort of cataract it is, what sort of intraocular lens they already have. We can start defining the type and the extent of that cataract. And obviously this is far faster than doing it by hand, far more accurate. As I said, you've got the added benefit that as it goes in and as you define it, that is data going straight into the database for that patient. And there are many of these, we're calling them elements for sake of in OpenEyes, and here's one that is the refraction as we go down. So these are all fairly standard things that would be done within a cataract examination, and all of these are defined for particular specialties, for particular procedures within the ophthalmic world, and there are many of them. It doesn't just apply to ophthalmology actually. This event-driven, data-driven model would be equally applicable to other disciplines as well, like ENT, oncology, cardiology, and in fact we've already had approaches by those disciplines to use those in those specialty areas exactly the same way, obviously different drawings and different ways of bringing the images in, but that will be something that's along the way. So if you imagine, easy to do in terms of getting the examination, adding it, determining a diagnosis, and then beyond that we can start then bringing in the medical images. Now I haven't got an example to show you here, but we're working with the likes of Zeiss and Topcon, etc., to bring in the images from those particular machines, drop them into this metaphor here, so that down the side, if you see it here, I can scroll down, you will see for an episode of care, in this case this adnexal episode of care, a number of events that have happened, be it correspondence, an examination as we're doing here, or an image coming in from a fundus machine, from a visual fields machine, or any other of the about 250,000 different bits of imaging equipment that ophthalmology seems to have in its armory. But all of those things are absolutely essential in the diagnosis of ophthalmic conditions and what then happens. So in brief, that's sort of OpenEyes, this open source project that's now spawned into an open source foundation, and now we're at the point of going live. We're live in Moorfields, other trusts are now starting to come on board. So just a very quick high level view of where we're at. I don't know how we're doing for time, Malcolm. I'm looking to my stand meister. Questions? Have we got time for questions? Yeah? Sorry.
Why are you open source and none of the other trust closed source? What have you done different from everyone else?
Yeah, the question is why have we gone open source and other trusts haven't? That's a very good question. I think there's open sources. There was a time where the commercial world was king. I think the day has come where open source has matured as a mechanism for going forward, and I think it certainly did in terms of project-based stuff like Apache. We're now at the point of big projects going live and products going live that work and are seen to be effective. And what we're seeing is a lot of people, a lot of trusts that we're talking to are really excited about this for two reasons. One, the cost. Secondly, though, is the collaboration, the fact that people can put in their experience and they know that what's going to happen is that it's going there for the wider good, that no one person is benefiting but everybody benefits from the use of that, from their experience. And certainly I don't know why other trusts aren't, but I know that a lot are beginning to look at it from what I'm seeing. Okay, question is sort of following on. So what experience did Moorfields had that other trusts didn't? I think that's probably fair. Why did it develop here? I think the key thing was actually it's down to one individual. The guy's name is Bill Aylward, who is a vitreoretinal surgeon who you may not have heard about, but he he's a medical director of Moorfields. He's a president of Uretina up until last year. He's been everywhere and he's done everything in terms of the vitreoretinal side. He's also happens to be a darn good coder as well as a very good surgeon. And he basically had developed this in his garage, a bit like the old Apple Steve Jobs approach. And it was seen to be so good that Moorfields took it on as its next EPR system. And round Bill and round his clinical expertise and expertise in understanding the computer systems, he then went on and built a team around him to then develop it. So he brought in open source expertise. And in fact, Moorfields doesn't have that IT experience, but what he has done is bring in a whole load of consultants and open source experts and people who are used to developing product commercially. And I come from Apple. I've got an Apple background and an IT background in terms of developing software. We've been brought together to make this thing successful, and so far we have been. We've had 3 releases in Moorfields, 5 I think it is maintenance releases, and we've got about 10 different trusts in the UK very interested, as well as 2 non-government organisations in the States who I'm going to be talking to next week. So the future, as they say, is very bright from an OpenEyes and open source point of view, at which point I think I need to exit quickly. But thank you very much indeed for your attention. If you want to know more, I'll be just around the corner.